Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So today's topic, I think, is a very important one that needs to be discussed. And kind of with that, I would love to hear from you in the comments below and love to see some of the discussion around this topic because I think it is very important. Today's episode actually was kind of, inspired in a way by a comment. And that comment is actually this one that I'm showing up on the screen right now, or at least if I'm editing this properly, I have. But basically, yeah, I'm not trying to put this person on blast. I mean, I've put away their name. Their name is no longer shown on this. Their logo is not shown on this either. I mean, that wasn't really a logo, but you know what I mean. Their icon, I should say, if I could speak properly. And also the comment and the user was removed essentially from the channel. So please don't go back and try to find this person. This episode's not supposed to be like a witch hunt or anything like that. The point is not go berate this person for their comment. That's not the point. And some of you might even agree with this comment, which is completely fine. Everyone can, have their own opinion on things, but I do think that this type of mentality, this type of comment is one that is, in my opinion, and in many others' opinions, I talked to my player group as well just about this in general, but problematic in the Commander community, in that it's a problem that this format has that other formats really don't have. I mean, you got toxic players, that kind of stuff too, but like you don't have the same type of issue. Let's just talk about the comment really quick. So, and apologies for the wording on this. Screw asking permission to play my deck. If it's a legal card, you shouldn't act like a punk just because you didn't bring the appropriate power level to the table. Okay, so this, in my opinion, is kind of... It just kind of displays exactly what is wrong and the problematic nature of some Commander players out there. Not many. Not many at all. Most Commander players that I played against, have played with and against have been absolutely amazing and have had great experiences, but I'm sure there are many of you out there, and every single person in my player group actually had a story as well that can relate to this statement, and just seeing someone else at an LGS that you've never played against, and you end up playing against them, and it's basically this kind of mentality from that player, and it just kind of ruins the entire experience for everyone else. I mean, this is, in my opinion, kind of like a pub stomper-ish mentality, right? Basically, where I'm playing Commander the way I want to. Everyone else has to, be okay with whatever I do, essentially, and just completely ignoring the social aspect of the format. This comment essentially came about, I think it was my most recent, one of my recent episodes where I did, like, my April Fool's episode, which I love doing, on the, Omnath, Locus of Eternity or something like that, essentially, like, where I made, like, an extremely overpowered, crazy card, essentially, that was just absolutely broken. And I essentially said, like, hey, this is the type of Commander that if you're going to build around, I was joking because, like, I also encourage people not to build around later because of April Fools, but if you're going to build around this kind of a Commander, be sure to ask your play group first, ask those at your LGS first if you're playing against them or planning on playing against them with it, because this is the type of Commander that can be problematic. It can just be completely unfair, and just, yeah, it's the kind of Commander that some players might not want to play against, and you need to understand that. And then this was the comment that happened because of that, essentially, that, hey, I don't need to ask permission to play my deck. You need to make sure that you aren't acting like a punk because you didn't bring the appropriate power level to the table. And that's kind of the problem with Commander, essentially, right? Is that what's the appropriate power level in Commander? That's different for every single player out there. Every single player out there that plays Commander has a different view on exactly what Commander means to them. It's different than any other format. In Standard, you can play whatever deck you want. You can play whatever level you want. The only goal in Standard is just win. That is the goal. The problem with Commander is that it's not problem with Commander, but it's a tournament. It's not a tournament format, right? It is not a competitive format. It is a format where, on average, you are going to win 25% of your games because it's a 4-player game. That's basically how it should be. It's a social format where, again, the important thing is pre-game, getting expectations on the same level is going to lead to a much better playing experience for everyone involved. And if you are playing Commander, you need to be cognizant of that. You need to be. If you are not, what are you playing Commander for? If you want to play, sure, at the highest levels of Commander, if you want to play the most competitive Commander, go play CDH. 100%. Absolutely. And in some ways, CDH is a much more, much less kind of up in the air format because essentially, right, everyone's on the same playing field. Everyone's on the same level, the same understanding before the game starts in CEDH. It's no holds barred. Do whatever you want. That's not how casual Commander is. And if you think it is that way, you are incorrect. I mean, I guess with this, every single one of you out there, not everyone to be out there, but many of you out there have probably experienced this at an LGS, where you just have played against someone who has this kind of mentality, this kind of, oh, well, it's your fault, not mine, that you weren't ready to play against this deck. Whether they told you it was like, oh, it's power level 5, don't worry about it, and then they actually, had a much more powerful deck than that. Or like, oh, it's just a pre-con with a couple of upgrades, and they souped it up, and then all of a sudden it is one that just pub stomps everyone else at the table. Or they brought out a commander, we'll talk about some examples here in a little bit, that is seen by many in the community as a somewhat problematic commander for one reason or another. High on the SALT score, according to EDH Rec, that kind of thing too. Where a lot of people in the community might not like playing against that kind of a commander. All right, and it's not those players' fault that you brought a deck to the table and you're trying to say that, oh, you should be okay with playing against any legal card in Commander. That's not how the format works. It's how CEDH works. It's how other formats work. It's not how Commander works. You're in the wrong format if that's your mentality. Okay, you just are. Okay, when the majority of the player base does not agree with you, you are incorrect and you're in the wrong spot. Person who commented this. Okay, and it needs to be a realization, I think, with those kind of players, essentially, that they ruin play experiences of other players. Like, literally, if you were just a brand new player to Commander and you take your pre-con to an LGS and you sit down to play a game, and then you just get pub stomped by a player like this because they think no holds barred, anything works, whatever, we don't need to discuss things ahead of time. You should have not acted like a punk and brought the appropriate power level to the table. You didn't bring the appropriate power level to play against me. How are they supposed to know what that power level is? You don't discuss it ahead of time, number one. Number two, what if they don't have a deck that is that power level because they're a brand new player? It's up to the more, I'm not saying franchise players, but the players who have been playing longer to understand that you need to, sure, bring different power levels to the table so that you can adjust to other players. That's what a social format is. You need to discuss things and be social so that you can adjust and everyone can be on the same page as much as possible. It's impossible for everyone to be the exact same page, right? But as much as possible so that you can get things figured out so everyone enjoys their experience. It's not just about your experience, poster, okay? It's not just about you. If you think it is, you're in the wrong format. Go play online against other people that you can't berate in person, okay? And I'm sure you're going to spam the ping chat thing or whatever it is. This kind of player, in my opinion, is the problematic piece of Commander when it comes to Commander players. Like, this kind of mentality is just the exact opposite of what this format is. It's a social format. Enjoy your time spending with other people, socializing while you're playing this amazing game, okay? That's what this is about. If you're just like, no, I need to just build the most hyper-competitive deck of all time and then lie about that, essentially, and then win every single game, my goodness. Good for you. Congratulations. That's not what this format's about. Okay, go play another format if that's what your thought process is. Okay? So let's go into some examples really quick just on why, again, this is a problematic thought process, essentially. And again, why players might not be okay with this kind of process. And here's the thing, too. Like, I'm not trying to say this is true or not, but there is kind of like that saying, right? At every office, there is a jerk. Right? At every single office out there in the United States and in the world, whatever it is, not every single one really, but like that's just the thing. Every single one there is a jerk. And if you don't know who that jerk is, then you're the jerk. Is that always true? Absolutely not. But if you're at an LGS and you've played there for years and years and years, and you've never played against anyone who is this kind of player, it might be you. If you're like, oh, I've never played against a pub stomper before. I'm not saying that you haven't played against a pub stomper, okay? But if you just have never seen any player like this, you might be that player. You might be the problem. Okay, so take a look inside and say, what can I do differently for the play experience for all four players, not just myself, to be better? Because again, Commander is a format where you're in a multiplayer format with four people. You're only expecting to win 25% of your games. That's how math works. Grow up. So again, do not expect that if you pull out Grand Arbiter Augustine IV at your table and say, I'm playing this, that every player is going to be okay with that. Because it is a type of strategy, typically with this commander, and just inherently on the way that this commander is literally designed, that is not okay with many players out there. Many players do not enjoy playing against stacks strategies. This commander is a stacks piece. 2/3 Human Advisor for 4 mana and Azorius. White spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Spells your opponent's cast cost 1 more to cast. Just because it is a legal card in Commander doesn't mean that other players can't be okay with playing against it. That's not how this works. Commander is a social format. Sure, go ahead and pull that out. Surprise whatever play, and then all of a sudden, next game, no one wants to play with you, and you're surprised? Or you're upset that no one wants to play with you in the next game? Goodness gracious. So basically, again, you can even just, if you're this kind of player, all right, and you're confused as to why players might not want to play against things, go take a look at EDH Rec, the Salt score, okay? Go look at the Salt score on EDH Rec. Just look at those cards and see, maybe I shouldn't play those cards. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you absolutely shouldn't. I'm saying that you shouldn't be surprised when someone gets upset that you play one of these cards, or again, attempt to say like, I want to play this deck, and someone says like, I don't want to play against that. You shouldn't act surprised when we have resources out there that show you, oh, the majority of Magic players out there, Commander players I should say, casual Commander players if I get more specific, do not like playing against this kind of effect. Also, Turgid, God of Fright. Technically I think Vorinclex is a higher assault score, but this one's like more of a Commander versus 1 to 99 essentially. So 2.2 on the Salt score. The highest, the saltiest Commander essentially out there, all right? You shouldn't have the expectation that everyone at the table is going to be okay with you playing this Commander. If you want to play it, ask. Ask. This is one of those Commanders you need to ask about ahead of time. Be like, hey, is everyone okay with that? Everyone might be. Everyone will be like, oh, sure, I'll pull out my deck that does this. I'll pull out my deck that does this. I'll pull out a deck that can compete with that. I'll pull out my ridiculous deck as well that is just overpowered, whatever it is going to be, okay? Or one that does this thing that other players don't want. But everyone can essentially get on the same page ahead of time. 4/5 Menace God that costs 5 mana. Whenever opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard on the battlefield under control. It is a type of play style that many players out there do not like to play against. This is like massive edict effect, discard effect, theft, essentially, that is way overpowered, way too low to the ground at 5 mana. And just not fun for many players to play against, okay? Turgid, God of Salt is not fun for many players to play against. So you should not, if you have a Turgid deck, expect that every single person, every single time you sit down at a table, is going to be okay with playing against this. That's just not how Commander works. Armageddon. These types of cards, again, not just Commanders, but 1s to 99. If you're just playing a normal game of Commander, and all of a sudden you play this, and then you're wondering why the other players at the table are not okay with that, goodness gracious, check out like any of a million articles on EDH about, mass land destruction and just its place in the format, or its place not in the format, essentially. Armageddon, a sorcerer for 4 mana, destroy all lands. That's just part of Commander. Commander players are not okay in general. Not saying there aren't ones out there. In general, casual Commander players are not okay with mass land destruction. The same is true for stacks. The same is true for Turgid type Commanders. It just, typically, players are not okay with that. So again, you shouldn't have the assumption that just because a card is legal and not banned, that you can just play it without having those kind of discussions ahead of time. Okay? Are there going to be expectations that are not met every single time? Absolutely. Are there going to be different thoughts on what power levels are going to be? Absolutely. And that's where, playing the second game, you adjust, right? Essentially, like, oh, shoes, I played like a deck that was way too big, way too powerful for that other deck. Oh, okay, I'll tone myself down. Instead of being like, well, that was great, I won, I'm going to play this same deck again. You only have like a precon, whatever, cool, I'm just going to beat you again, great. Goodness gracious. Next up, Winter Orb. Again, stacks pieces too, obviously. 2.99 in the Salt score. I don't know if I said the Armageddon. 2.69 Salt score for Armageddon. 2.99 for Winter Orb. Yeah, if you pull out a Winter Orb and you're like, you should be okay with it, it's legal. Goodness gracious. Artifact for 2. If it's untapped, players can't tap more than 1 land during the untap steps. This can lead to a long and arduous game for other players, and many players out there do not like playing against this. Even if you think this is completely fine, great. Go find a playgroup that's completely fine with that. Okay? I mean, even commanders that, again, aren't inherently salty. I don't think Jorah pops up on the salt scale at all, actually. A 3/3 Human Artificer for 4 mana, and is it, whenever you cast a Historic spell, draw a card, Artifacts, Legendary, Sagas, Historic. You might build a deck like I did when I was very early in my commander career, right? Build deck like I did that I thought was completely fine, all right? There's no reason anyone could at all have a problem with this deck. It's completely fair. And in fact, one of my reasonings for that too is like, it's budget, right? How bad can it be? It's only $25 total for the whole deck. How bad can this be? How can other players complain about this deck? I played it once, twice at LGSs and just very quickly learned that many players out there aren't okay with Artifact Storm, especially if you don't give them a heads up ahead of time. So yeah, I was having 20-minute turns essentially, and you could just see all the other players just checking out and just wondering why, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't play this deck. Number one, I actually have done an episode on this, like the one deck I don't play anymore. I still have it in case, I need to play at a higher level. Great. When those expectations ahead of time are discussed, great. But again, being a newer commander player, I did not understand essentially that part of the format, and that's completely fine not to understand it, but then you need to adjust, essentially, and I did. I don't play that deck anymore. I have it off to the side in case, again, everyone's like, oh, okay, cool, let's pull out our most powerful decks to end the night or whatever, have a really quick game. Great, you got one. Be like, oh, is everyone okay with my Jorah Artifact Storm? Oh, absolutely, great, okay, do that. But don't assume that, again, because the commander isn't on the salt score either, or because, my deck is budget friendly, that everyone's going to be okay with it no matter what the deck does. There are certain kind of things out there, again, land destruction, mass land destruction, I should say, mass land destruction, stacks, Turgid type commanders, or just stormy commanders that can be solitaire essentially, that players are not okay with. Inktrader Nephilim. I built a deck around this. Actually, I built an initial deck around this where I definitely asked the playgroup ahead of time if they're okay with that because this is not legendary. I built a deck around that. And then actually I switched to a deck where this is like a secret commander in the deck, where it goes Eska God of the Tree or the other side Prismatic Bridge, which goes into that. Essentially, right, you get Prismatic Bridge out and play. This is the only creature in the deck. You're going to hit it. So a 3/3 Nephilim for 4 mana. Whenever a player plays an instant or sorcery spell, if it's only targeted that spell, copied for each other creature the spell could target. Each targets different one of its creatures. Basically like Zada crazy. This is Zada that targets everything. So essentially, again, I have a 5-color deck. I get Prismatic Bridge out. Next upkeep, reveal the top library till I hit this. It comes into play. I win when that happens. I win. It is nearly impossible to stop, essentially, because I'm going to play a spell that can draw me 10 cards. It only costs me 1 mana. I will then play a spell that can make me 20 treasures that only cost 2 mana. Whatever it is, basically, I just keep doing this over and over again, and it's impossible for the other players to win or stop me at all. Not impossible. There are ways to do it, but rarely do they have the way that they can stop it. This is yet another deck that now I self-police, like, yeah, that was a bit much. I'm not going to do that again. So there are mistakes that can be made, even by commander players who've been playing for a long time, right, when it comes to expectations. So adjust afterwards. Don't do that again. Or again, with this deck, I will always ask if people are okay with it. I pull it out a lot less these days. In fact, I haven't played it in quite a while. But again, if other players are playing, like, oh, let's play a little more high power kind of deck, whatever. Sure, I'll ask. I will describe what the deck does, and I will say, is everyone okay with that? Everyone's okay with it? Move forward. If they're not, pick a different deck. Next up, Hypergenesis. Again, a card that is not, I don't believe on the salt scale at all, a card that is not banned, but a card that is very much one that if you build an entire deck around this, you need to ask others if they're okay with it. My Cody deck is built around this, and again, kind of like my Prismatic Bridge deck with Inktrader Nephilim, you're guaranteed to hit this, because it's the only 0 mana card in the entire deck, essentially, right? There's no mana cost, but it's basically 0 when you reveal at the top, with like a cascading type effect, right? Which Cody does. So, I am guaranteed with this deck to hit this card. My deck is built around this. It's green, so spend 3 for 1 green. Starting with you, each player may put an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land from their hand on the battlefield. Repeat this process until one puts a card in play. It changes the entire game of command. The entire game of Magic is changed with this, okay? Instead of it being, all right, we need to pay for things, it's no, just dump things out of your hand into play. And obviously, I built the deck, so I have more advantages than other players when it comes to that kind of things. Like, I get ETBs from creature that are great. Like, like, oh, I draw some cards, or I bounce your things that you just cheated to play, or I steal your things. That kind of thing. So essentially, it changes the entire aspect of the entire game of Commander. And yeah, it's something that you need to ask other players if they're okay with it. If everyone's expecting just normal game of Commander, and then you're like, haha, surprise, something completely different. We're playing this or Goblin game or something. No, you need to ask. I mean, if your entire deck's built around like recasting, copying Goblin game, that kind of thing too. But anyways, you need to ask. All right. It's just something that takes some time to learn, maybe where you need to ask. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be like, oh, sheesh. I mean, we say we're playing power level 7, but my 7 is a lot higher of a power level than that player's 7, so I need to adjust for the next game. It's okay, but it's a social format. You need to be okay with talking to others, socializing, and actually making adjustments to your play and your attitude toward the game if you are going to be part of the Commander community, essentially. Because if not, what's the point? Commander is a social format. If you're just in it to win every single game, go play CEDH. Go play another format. Commander's about socializing and enjoying yourselves. Everyone enjoying their time playing, not just you. Next up, I'm going to bring up an example that Eddie brought up. So Eddie actually built a Kinnan Bonder Prodigy deck, and Kinnan is an absurdly broken commander. And Eddie's Kinnan deck is really, really, really good. Really, really, really focused in the type of deck that, again, Eddie would not just bring out at a table. This is Eddie's deck, though, to pub stomp the pub stompers. If someone is, like our commenter, essentially, someone who has that type of attitude, just pub stomp the table and is looking to do so again, Eddie pub stomps them back with this kind of a deck and just says, you know what, put you in your place. You need to be understanding that this kind of a commander, and Eddie isn't something you just pull out against just miscellaneous people without giving an expectation of what power level is, essentially. And the players that do that are just, goodness gracious. Hogak, Arisen Accomplice. This is also kind of an example from Alec. Alec's Hogak deck, I love it. It's absolutely amazing. Would I say it's overpowered? Absolutely not. But can it take a player out quickly? Yes, it definitely can. Hogak, an 8/8 avatar for 7 mana and Golgar. You can't spend mana to cast a spell, but you can convoke and delve it out. You can also cast from your graveyard. It's got trample. So this is a commander that is unlike any other, but this is one that is really hard to get out, but Alec built an absurdly amazing deck around this, where Alec can consistently get it out turn 2, maybe even turn 1. So when another player pub stomped the table and was unwilling to change what they were doing essentially in the next game, Alec pulled this out and took that player out by turn 4. That player was then upset that they were targeted, and they shouldn't be, because they were pub stomping the rest of the table in the previous game. So you know what? Taking that player out is just kind of, taking your own medicine at that point. Now, when it comes to this kind of an attitude, are players that have that kind of attitude of everyone needs to adjust to me or be okay with whatever I do no matter what, or this is, it's a game, things aren't banned, then they are 100% legal, I can do whatever I want. Is that person ever going to change their attitude? I don't know. But I do think that encouraging all players out there, including you who are watching right now, to have those discussions before the games start and be open and honest about what kinds of decks you're playing, what the perceived power levels by you, and yes, again, those expectations might be different, but figure it out after the first game too, and be willing to adjust. Those are important discussions to have. And again, if you're the one person at your LGS and no one wants to play with you, chances are you might be that kind of player that doesn't want to meet anyone else's expectations, and you want everyone else to meet yours. And you might be that player that's like, if it's legal, I should be able to play it. It should be completely fine. My advice to you, go play a different format. Go play competitive EDH, where again, expectations are no holds barred. That's completely fine. That's great. Or go play another format. Go play standard. Go play any other format that is competitive, where the expectation is win at all costs. That's not Commander's expectation. That's why there's a Rule 0. If you don't believe in Rule 0, you're not playing Commander. That's basically it. Okay? So now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to hear from you, and I would love to hear from you, especially on this episode. Love to see some of the discussions around this topic, and basically let me know if you've experienced this type of player either, or if you have the same kind of perception of that. If you have that kind of perception, why? What is that perception essentially that you have of how Commander should be played? So let me know in the comments below, please. I do think it's an important thing. Again, Commander is a social format. I always say this, just talk. It is one that needs social interactions to actually work. It really is. It is one that absolutely needs those kind of discussions ahead of time to actually work again when you're playing with people you don't know. If you're playing against your own playgroup, you know after a while what everyone's expectations are, okay? But if you're playing against random people in your LGS, you can't just make assumptions that, okay, yeah, like, I'm just going to pull out this deck, know that it's going to be okay, and yeah, you need to have discussions, okay? Talking is important in Commander. It's especially important when there's new players involved, too. Like I mentioned earlier, someone comes with a pre-con deck, don't pub stomp them. Don't just, have them have a terrible first experience in Magic. Goodness gracious. Be more welcoming, be more inviting. Comment below your thoughts are on this. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.